back. Hope everyone has been well energized, well fed, well recharged, because we're about to go into it. We are now introducing the part of reparations that has not been discussed enough. That part is the internal reparations, the self-repair, which is so important and so often overlooked and so often not addressed. Because what happens is, regardless of whatever victimization that anyone has endured, there is still a process that has to be done where the person that is victimized has to take part and be accountable for their healing, even after receiving justice. Because you can get justice and get everything you do, but there's still more healing to be done. So this part here is addressing the part that's not necessarily discussed enough, but definitely essential, definitely important that we address. So I am going to turn this over to Dr. Onaje, Sister Lisa, and Brother Cam, where they're going to discuss the Keiger report.
So good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, wherever you are. This is truly an honor for me to sit as the co-chair of the Health Commission with my beloved sister, Lisa Dennis, and to feature not only our male chairperson, but also he's a member of the Health Commission, and I'm talking about Cam Howard. Next slide. So epigenetics is a study of how your behavior and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. Unlike genetics, epigenetics changes are reversible and do not change your DNA sequence, but they do change the way that the body reads that sequence. So once we understand that, that's good news, people. Sometimes we think that the damage has been done is irreversible, but in fact, it is reversible. And that means we can bring hope and we can bring in the future of our people. Cam Howard, a member of the Health Commission, has worked tirelessly to bring this to our attention, given that transgenerational epigenetic inheritance and systematic racism is what we're talking about. A report has been prepared by Joan Kaufman, Maria Khan, and Julia Martini. Next slide. So this report speaks about the enslavement of our people, first brought to here in 1526. But of course, we know we was here with Obadeli, who came here, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about particularly those Africans that came subsequent after that, but the report is broken down into 5 sections. The first section discusses the key structures in American society that perpetuates the cycles of disadvantage, of oppression, and ongoing experiences of adversity and trauma for people of African descent. The second session provides an introduction to the field of epigenetics and the concept of transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. Next slide. So the third section deals with the state of the art of research on transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. The fourth section deals with discussion factors that can migrate the effects of historical and personal trauma and promote strength and resilience. And the fifth section deals with policy and practice and research. And this is where we come in, where we have to get our people organized around this new science and showing how transgenerational epigenetic consequences have occurred, but more importantly, in terms of the healing. My research as a doctorate in social work has looked at what is called Wahimi Misu, which means a Kemet word that means a national recovery program of Ma'at, of order, of balance, and harmony. So I'm going to turn this next slide. So earlier I spoke about infant mortality, I spoke about maternal mortality. All that is connected to what? Intergenerational epigenetic consequences. Next slide. So Kim Howard, he's a member of our Health Commission. He's the organizer and he's the project leader of this project. And I want to turn it over to him at this point.
Thank you, Barbara. I wanted to pretty much just give an overview of how we came to get this particular report. Back in April of last year, when the first stats came out on the high level of deaths in the Black community as a result of COVID, in St. Louis, there was 100% of the deaths were Black. In Milwaukee at that time, 81% of the deaths were Black. Chicago, 74% of the deaths were Black. Detroit, 80% of those who were infected were Black. And in the entire state of Louisiana, when the first numbers came out, mortality numbers came out, 70% of the deaths were Black, even though Louisiana was 32% of the population. And many of the initial causes for this disproportionate death in our communities was said to be because of pre-existing illnesses, acts of racial discrimination, or manifestations of structural racism and social disadvantage. In particular, there was a huge focus on pre-existing illnesses, hypertension, high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, et cetera. But I had been introduced probably about 13 years ago, 2013, let me say that, to this issue of transgenerational epigenetic inheritance by a doctor here in Chicago who was doing research around combating the ruling of the federal judge when he stated we were too far removed from the injury for them to grant us the lawsuit that was filed in 2005. And he was making his claim that we're not too far removed from injury. We are, in fact, still injured as a result of the enslavement and the trauma of Jim Crow, et cetera, that has been passed down generationally, and particularly in our epigenome. And so for me, I wrote a piece saying that it was actually the transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, which was the reason for the disproportionate number of deaths in our community. And in order to understand transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, as Brother Dr. Onaje stated, you must first look at historical trauma. And historical trauma is the trauma that collectively happens to a people at one particular time. And for us, we know about the Jewish Holocaust. It was a 6-year period, and then it stopped. And generally, they measure historical trauma from a start period and a stop period. But with us, there's been no stop period. And so we don't fit into any traditional model of historical trauma. And so for us, it's been 400 years of ongoing terror and trauma. There may have been some brief periods of respite, but overall, we can chart traumatic experiences amongst our people throughout the time we've been in this country. And so historical trauma has two outcomes. One is transgenerational transmission of trauma, where the trauma itself is transmitted generationally. And when it's termed transgenerational, it means it's been generated beyond 3 generations. There's generational transmission, which means mother to son. There's intergenerational transmission, which is grandchild to grandmother to child to grandchild. And then transgenerational means more than those 3 generations of transmission. So transgenerational transmission of trauma is trauma passed down. And as a result of the transgenerational transmission of trauma, we get weakened and compromised immune systems and many and varied psychological challenges that we have to deal with and our children have to deal with that's passed down. We know that our sister Joy DeGruy called in one of those instances post-traumatic slave syndrome. But in addition to transgenerational transmission of trauma, you have the physical transgenerational transmission of injury, which is to the epigenome, which is a part of the gene, as Brother Onaje stated. And it is these transmissions, these effects, this modification, if you will, of our genes is what leads to those pre-existing illnesses that COVID took advantage of, and that our health is the primary profile of our health in this country. Higher levels of heart disease, higher levels of obesity, higher levels of hypertension, poor, and I think it was like 20 to 25% of our community, of our people over age 20 have either fair or poor health. And that means that 80% do not have good health or great health, or that's age over age 20. But the majority of our people have poor or fair health. And so this is a challenge, and we say that that challenge is a result of the historical trauma that has never stopped and it is ongoing, especially with police terror that's taking place in our community now. So when we saw this in April of last year, and even before this, NCOBRA Chicago had put together an initiative against Rush University Hospital in 2008. We knew that they had, during the Jim Crow period, they had dug up African graves in order to experiment on African people and attract people to their medical college. And we did an initiative against them in 2008. And one of our demands was a center for the study of the effects of historical trauma. And we need that more now than we did then. And so this project that we enlisted Kennedy Keiger to engage in is to help us convince not only our own people, but the powers that be, that we need this center to study the effects and how to mitigate the effects of historical trauma in the area of transgenerational transmission of trauma or in transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. But more importantly than that, we're talking about internal reparations. We need a national healing project that we ourselves can implement for us, by us. And so we know for us to have that national healing project, as Brother Onaje said, this does not have to continue. We know there are some things that can be done to reverse the effects of historical trauma. And so we needed a medical institutional report to take to our people to get them to understand what is taking place and what we need to do, what is our true health profile in this country as a result of living under oppressed conditions. And so we contacted Black medical universities, Howard University Medical School, McCary University Medical College. We got no response. And so we were also at this particular time talking to a young sister who was trying to get NCOBRA some money from Open Societies. She worked for Open Societies. That fell through. But anyway, she knew a professor when she was at, I think, Yale, who introduced her to transgenerational epigenetics, and she linked us together. This professor, Dr. Joan Kaufman, is at Kennedy Keiger Institute, which is an affiliation of Johns Hopkins University. And again, we needed a medical institutional report, and our first choice, of course, was to our own people, our own institutions, which, believe it, which really are not our own institutions, but that was our first choice. So we did contract with Kennedy Keiger, and as Brother Onaje said, there's 5, they did give us a draft of this report that we were looking for. It is not finished, it's not what we fully want, because there was not enough focus on diet and nutrition. And diet and nutrition is what we can control. We can't control police violence. We can't control white racist aggression, but we can control our diet and our nutritional intake of supplements. And so we wanted to, and so we need more emphasis in that report on what we can do internally. And so we'll be, the Health Commission and myself, we'll be going back and forth. We'll bring in Dr. Randall, as Dr. Onaje stated, who's part and parcel of the Health Commission, and we'll work it out so we can have an NCOBRA document that we can begin to be the lead in the healing of our community from this historical trauma that has damaged our our health status in this country. And I'll stop there and turn it over to Sister Lisa.
Well, thank you so much. And what I'm just going to be doing is providing some feedback so far and just a little bit of input. And I just have to say, I have not had the chance to really look at that report and digest it in the way that I would like to. So I'm just going to be very open about that. But believe you me, I will be. And I think that it is great that we have this information. And I just wanted to add to this that health, and this is really important because ultimately we are the ones responsible for our internal healing. We know that we certainly do need certain kind of support structures, but the internal healing is what we can give to ourselves. The reparations, like the monetary aspect in terms of what we are owed, is definitely something that we definitely hold this government accountable for and want every aspect of it that is owed to us, and every money, for me personally, I don't care if it's check, cash app, whatever, I want everything in every way that is owed to us, everything. But the truth of the matter is the internal dynamics, the internal repair is what we can give. And part of the thing that must be emphasized with this when we talk about healing ourselves and when we talk about what has to be done is that we are not looking for a Eurocentric model, like I say, that they euphemistically called science, and to have that superimposed on us. That will not work. One of the things that I have observed in my studying what was going on with this pandemic and trying to understand it, and I would just be looking at the numbers with a lot of the models that were doing the tracking of this disease. And one of the things that I found interesting was that the numbers, at least what they were tracking, how they come across these numbers, I cannot speak to that, but the numbers in terms of the way African people were hit throughout the diaspora was not matching the numbers that was going on in terms of what was happening in the United States. And I know one country that I had been looking at was Haiti. And Haiti, we know Haiti is going through so much turmoil. They, are a poor country. They talk about their infrastructure and all of this, and yet they were very, very surprised by the way that Haiti was not reflecting the numbers and what was happening in terms of this country. And what I thought was really interesting was that I had read something in the Miami Herald, and they were talking about the way this pandemic was devastating the Haitian American, for lack of a better, or the Haitian people who were living in this country, in the United States, how that was really affecting them badly, how they were being hard hit. But yet, when you look at the numbers of what was going on in Haiti, for the longest time, the numbers that were going on in Haiti, the numbers were at under 250 deaths. Now it's about 400 and something, but still, in terms of the rate of transmission and how they were being affected, was quite different. On the continent of Africa, Africa has well over 1 billion people, but in terms of continent-wise, they have some of the best records. Currently, they are at about 130,000 deaths, which is still, even if it's one death, that's still too high. And for the longest time, the continent was holding at about 90,000 deaths. And recently, from what I can observe, I know that there has been some discussion and some talk going around about what has happened once people have begun to take the vaccine, or once the vaccine's been introduced to various areas of the world. And I have observed that when it was introduced on the continent, that this is just my observation, that the numbers seem to have increased, but still it's much, much lower than the rate of transmission and the death rate in the United States and the European countries. And I have observed this not just in terms of the African countries, but also in terms of the countries that tend to use traditional African medicine or their traditional medicines. So I say all of that to say that it is critical it is critical that we fight on that front as well. We're not talking about, oh my gosh, we want this medical system to try to help us or to try to find a way, to allow their doctors to work on us, or even to have Black doctors. And I certainly am appreciative of that. In fact, studies have shown consistently that Black people tend to do better when the doctors are Black. So even within this system, but I think we have to put a challenge out there to the Black medical establishment in this country, and to say to them that when we are talking about healing and when we are talking about our health going forward, we are not just talking about substituting this Eurocentric paradigm with Blackface. No, we're talking about a completely different paradigm. We're talking about a completely different trajectory. I found it very interesting that they have documented that not only does Africa, we've all know that the first life was found, on the continent of Africa, the first human life, at least. It's probably true of the first life forms. We definitely do know that the first human life was found on the continent of Africa. But I think it's important for us to understand this. It's not just that the first human life forms were found on the continent of Africa. I've been reading that we have the most diverse DNA, or at least some parts of the continent of Africa. African people have the most diverse DNA, which they are saying shows that all life, extends from the continent of Africa. But even more importantly, that the longest uninterrupted lineage, so it's not just that the first life forms were on, or the first human life forms were on the continent, but the longest uninterrupted lineage of human life, at least from the start of what they call modern humans. Because as we know, there have been various forms of humans, whether it's hominids and such as that. But we are what is known as modern humans. And so the longest uninterrupted lifespan of modern humans, and they date this back to about 250,000 years. It's probably longer ago than that, but roughly about, is in Africa. And that means that we were able to, our people had the knowledge and the understanding of how to live on this earth, how to move within the environment of the earth, how to appreciate it, to have life continue uninterrupted. I know that European, and I'm certainly not an expert on this at all, but I had been reading that modern day Europeans, as we know it, I think they go back about 40,000 years, and they have said that they can show that there was an interruption in terms of their DNA, and that what it looks like today is not what it looked like, I guess, initially starting out. But I think that's a very significant point. I don't think that's any small point at all. That as Africans, we have the longest uninterrupted a DNA or life lineage on the planet. And that means that was not just by accident. That was not just by happenstance. It means that we had to understand, we had to have the knowledge to know about, what is going on, to be able to live in our environment. And I think that that's definitely a history to be celebrated, but even more so, that we need to challenge this paradigm of what they even call science. Because like I said, it's not like it's not like Europeans sat down and objectively talked with us. It's not like our ancestors came over here and we were, oh, well, you know what? That way is so much better. Therefore, we're not going to use our ways any longer, because that way, their way of doing things actually works. We've seen the things have been documented. They have set up various studies that were objective studies, and that our people were able to sit down at the table with anyone and to, come to this conclusion. That is not what happened with what they call science or medical science. That's not what happened at all. As we know, it came to us with the barrel of a gun, and by completely disrespecting and demonizing our culture. And that's primarily the way Eurocentric medicine has been delivered to the rest of the world. We should not allow that to go unchallenged. Not that we have been, but certainly when I hear people talking about science, I like to remind them of that is the science that they're talking about. So I just wanted to bring this to the discussion. And certainly, I guess we can open it up, and Brother Onaje and Brother Cam Howard, I should say Dr. Onaje. I know he's not asking for that, but I just want to acknowledge the tremendous the tremendous achievement of our brother, Dr. Onaje Louise, and also our brother, Cam Howard. So we can just open it back up again.
Yeah, so you guys want to give 5 minutes? You guys just want to wrap up before we go to Q&A?
Well, let me just bring in just one other point. I know I always say I'm going to turn it over to somebody, then I think of something else. But one primary way that I can think of how this really applies, and again, my brother, I want to learn the lessons that his experience taught me, but I'm in that hospital system, and I know I don't trust what I'm being told, but it's like I have nobody else to ask about this. I should have been able to say, I want to talk to a doctor of traditional medicine. I should have been able to say that. In fact, I had seen something pertaining to tuberculosis, and this was coming from the CDC over here, and how they had published information pertaining to people in China who were living over here. And they specifically talked about you have to respect them. They have their traditional Chinese medicines. That's very important to them. However, I don't think any kind of document like that exists for us. Not that we should even need their permission for them to sit there and to say that it's okay. But this is something that we definitely have to fight for in terms of ourselves. But ideally, I should have been able to say, I want to talk to a traditional African doctor or a naturopathic doctor, but you're not given those options when you find yourself dealing with an emergency situation at all. And even when you ask for another opinion, you're only going to get another opinion of somebody who's been trained in Eurocentric medicine. So, really, and especially if you're in like a hospital or an emergency room setting like I was in, I didn't have nothing. It was only that way. And that's a way I would never choose under any circumstance for me personally. I think the disease is much kinder than the medical treatment that was set up by our oppressor. So
I just want to say quickly that the brother who introduced me to transgeneration epigenetics, Brother Mansong, put in the chat, his name is Dr. Kenneth Mave. He was trained at McCary Medical College. And he wrote the book, Competent Proof, as a defense of how to overcome the legal challenges that Judge Norval, in his decision to block our reparations lawsuit, how to overcome those using the issue of transgeneration epigenetic inheritance. So Competent Proof is the book, and Dr. Kenneth Nave is the brother's name.
In closing remarks, I'd like to say that Sister Enola, I think she's going to be speaking soon, but she, the founder of the Healing Network, Lisa and I have been trained in that modality, as well as my wife, Dr. Fatima Hafiz. Dr. Fatima Hafiz has an organization called Transformative Education Associates, and these kinds of projects needs to be broadcast and spread out. So there are a number of efforts that are taking place that is attending to the internal reparations, right? The healing of ourselves internally. And I just wanted to mention the work that she's doing, which is phenomenal. The understandings I have would not be those understandings without her input along the way. I would say that my nonprofit, Wahimi Misu, Healing Well, is saying that a healer in every home, yes, and a healing well in every home. We have to establish ourselves as healing centers, right? Inside this body that we occupy, inside the families and inside the communities we occupy. So we want you to join our commission. We need your help. And that's how we will get healed, by doing it together. We say, Pamoja Tuta Shinda.
Right. All right. Excellent, enlightening, empowering presentation. We have some questions in the chat. Again, you can, excuse me, in the Q&A. Again, it's best to put the questions in the chat so they don't get buried by other people's things if you want it seen directly. First question, what connections, exchanges are being done with the medical professionals within the Nation of Islam?
So I have been in communication with a sister from the nation who is a professor, medical doctor at Howard University. She's aware of the research that we're doing, undertaking, as well as a sister, a doctor in Chicago who's with the nation, a sister by the name of, can't remember her first name, but she's a Shabazz. She's opened a alternative wellness clinic in Chicago. She's also aware of the research. And once this document is produced, it is our intention then to not only go to medical professionals in the nation, but Black medical professionals nationwide to bring them into the conversation by having this document as a centerpiece for that conversation.
Okay. So, next question. Is anyone in touch with our conscious Black attorneys to advise on medical liabilities of these institutions? So I guess speaking about lawsuits, speaking about medical malpractice, that type of stuff.
I want to say that I'm not directly in touch yet, but I think that work will definitely have to be done, especially with the trajectory of the way, the remedy, the so-called remedy that the United States is proposing for this pandemic, and that's just a vaccine. And I know that, I know that people are organizing, but I think definitely that we should make that a part of our organizing as well, because if we say we do not want to do something, if we say that we do not want to take this vaccine, which I think we have the right to say whether we do or do not wish to do that, but we should be able to have some way of challenging. And even for those of us who did take it and who may have been affected by it because of something that's so superimposed on you, but lawsuits and all of that kind of stuff when it comes to the medical establishment, as difficult as it is when it comes to the police, it's just as difficult, in my opinion, when it comes to the medical establishment. But yeah, this is something we should work for, and we should work to definitely make this understood that we are surely talking about a position it's a very political position as well, but a position about self-determination. People have the right to say, I don't want this system of medicine, I prefer this system. And we have the right to do that.
And certainly we look at the work of Dr. Sabi, where he's the only person that I know that was challenged by the AMA and won in federal court, saying that I'm not teaching medicine, I'm just teaching diet. So we already have the precursors in front of us in terms of saying which way to go. We know the path, we know which way to go, but we just need those people to study. Sheikh Anta Diop says that we must become multi-geniuses in terms of this and just multidisciplinary approaches, and that's really where we are as a people, bringing the work together that people have done in their different silos, and even inside of NCOBRA. How does the Health Commission work with the Legal Commission, so we can bring all that information together? And that's we're working towards that synergy.
Yeah, this is very important that that we have our own folks doing things for us and making sure that
what is his name?
Let me just mute everybody for a second. Okay. So, guys, sisters, your time. Go ahead. I'm listening.
I would just like to
We're listening.
This document, if I can do a shared screen on this document, I'm gonna try to act like I know what I'm doing here, like I'm very professional. But let me just see if I can just share one document that I want to just make everybody aware, at least.
Okay.
Can I? Yeah, let me,
All right. Well, in the meantime, if it comes up, fine. But let me just get this question in.
oh, sure.
What connections with the NMA? The NMA is the National Medical Association, the collective voice of African American physicians and leading force for parity and justice in medicine and elimination of disparities. There's about 500,000 African American physicians and their patients, and the NMA is a 501c3 national professional and scientific organization. So you guys got connections with those folks, or are you familiar with those folks?
I just want to remind everyone that the commission is only a year old, the Health Commission. We had some great challenges over this last year. So these questions are excellent questions, but if you raise the question, we need you to make the connection. We need you to join the commission and become that member that brings those resources to what we're doing. That's really the simple answer of that. If anyone else wants to respond, certainly go ahead, but that's the only way I see it, that's through our Ujima collective work responsibility, we can make these connections, but you have to step forward to do that work.
Right.
Yep.
And
Go ahead,
I-
Sister.
I unite with that. I think it is important to also begin to reach out to them as well. And certainly all of the help that, I mean, we do need people to build, we do need people that we can build this commission. And certainly we also want people to always submit ideas, but surely we do need people to help build this commission.
So I would like to just unite with that as well. We have to also be cognizant of that many of our quote unquote national organizations are very conservative and not radical. And I think even though we reach out to them, we have to reach out to those within the organization that are of a radical bent, because we know there are many MDs out there who are speaking like very powerfully to the fact that this country, just being in this country is a deleterious effect, has a deleterious effect on our health, just living in America as Black people. And they're not being heard within that medical establishment. And so we will reach out. I think that that's a good direction, but we have to be clear that, sometimes they have a very conservative stance, not going against the AMA, if you will.
Did that come up when I tried to share this screen? I'm going to try it one more time.
Wait, Lisa, hold on. We got some more questions for us.
Okay.
Hold on a second.
Sure.
All right. It's another question. The CDC may be allowing Pfizer to test their medical injections on young people under 12, and private businesses are requiring their employees to be vaccinated. There could be up to thousands of already deaths from this vaccine. Should we not be concerned to contact our legal professionals soon? And I can attest to this, where there's almost peer pressure. If you're in certain jobs and certain employment, certain places, there's almost peer pressure. Like, oh, you didn't get your vaccine? Oh, why not? What's wrong with you? And it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, are you pressuring me? No, I'm not pressuring you. I'm just saying, well, what's your problem with it? I was like, well, do I have a right to not do it? I mean, like, why are you questioning? So it's a very, very good point about these vaccines, because there's a lot of peer pressure and employment pressure, to be honest.
Oh, it's tremendous. And there's no justification for this kind of pressure at all, because the results in the vaccine itself does not add up. It really just does not. And again, for those who have taken the vaccine, for those who have decided to take it, that is certainly your right. And I don't want anybody to perceive this as ganging up on anyone, whether they decide to take it or to not take it. But there is tremendous pressure. There's tremendous bullying. There's tremendous intimidation that has been happening pertaining to making people take this vaccine from a country, by the way, that has one of the worst records in the world. The trajectory that the way this pandemic happened in this country is not necessarily the way it happened all over the world. We need to know that. So there's tremendous pressure. But I just want to say there's been a new development in that the CDC has, or the FDA has said, or that there's talk doing this, but they have said that they're going to make them put a warning label on this vaccine about myocarditis, I think it is, that because they have seen in enough younger people that there's heart conditions that have developed with younger people.
Wow.
In myocarditis. In fact, I just saw something last night from Pfizer that I got from the FDA's website. And I will make sure that I provide this link and then I send this information out to NCOBRA. But right from Pfizer, from the FDA website and Pfizer, they are saying that another possible side effect is that myocarditis. You could get myocarditis, and then also another another condition. So
Okay. So I have a question.
Like heart muscle and something else pertaining to the heart.
So with all that being said, Brother Onaje and Brother Cam, so the question dealt with legal professionals. So do we need to be getting lawyers on retainer, like before we get the vaccine or something? Is that something we need to really give some serious thought, especially with certain jobs where they're putting pressure on us?
Well, we need to be clear that NCOBRA is for reparations. So as we raise these issues, we have to put those responsibility in the organizations that's there to assume that responsibility. NCOBRA cannot be everything to everyone all at once. So we're going to have to direct our resources in such a way that we stay clear about what our lane is and what we have to do. Because if we start changing all those cases, you see, then our efforts in terms of making the demand with the research for the reparations would be halted or at least delayed, and therefore the solution to our people's problems will be delayed. So we have to be very strategic in terms of how we are allocating our mental and time resources.
Right. Okay. But I do think like with
Cam, you're on mute, Cam. Brother Cam, you're on mute.
Oh.
Go ahead, Sister Lisa.
I was going to say, I do think, though, some of the research that we're doing, that we can help to provide information with some other sources that would be mounting a legal challenge. And again, this is also so new in terms of this whole pandemic, this whole vaccine. It's so new as we are trying to figure out what's going on ourselves. But we should also know that Pfizer, right, in there, first of all, that is, it has not been approved for anything. In fact, on the Pfizer document says the FDA has not approved any vaccine at all for preventing this disease. There has been no vaccine that's been approved, that the FDA has approved to prevent this disease. And I'm like, so what you're saying right there, the vaccine doesn't prevent it. And they also acknowledge that they're still doing conducting trials on the vaccine. They're still doing, so as they're putting this vaccine out, they're conducting trials. I say all of that to say that should be, I think, a good argument for people to be able to put forward that, first of all, it is, it's issued under an emergency use authorization. It is not an approved vaccine at all. And especially with some of the recent developments that have come up. But I do know that there's a lot of pressure put on people to take it. And if you're working, you have a job, and your job is saying you have to take it, and if you don't, I recognize, in other words, the tremendous pressure that a lot of people are under, and I don't want to appear to be sensitive to that.
Understood. So now, in these last couple of minutes, do you guys have a specific charge, direction that, as the Health Commissioner of NCOBRA, that you would like to direct our folks regarding reparations and health and internal reparations specifically, and dealing with our injury areas? Like, what would be your charge if each of you could take a minute, just 60 seconds, could just, explain that to us so we can walk away with a charge and move forward?
So first of all, let us recognize we are not medical experts, right? We are organizers. We're here to facilitate the organization of the commission, which means we have to have specific people to take every life stage of infants, of youth, of adolescents, of young adults, of middle-aged adults, and elders. We need someone to be responsible for each of those life stage transitions, and then bringing more resources to each of those sub-commissions so that we can bring all this information together. So that's what we're doing. We're inviting people to become organizers in that process and go to the experts who have studied and given their life and their careers, like Dr. Fred Newsom, for example.
Okay. Brother Cam?
So yeah, I would like to say, we're talking about internal reparations and health. And I want us to all be aware that the history of enslavement, Jim Crow, post-Jim Crow, has had a scientific, measurable, negative effect on our health currently. And it would have the same on our children and our grandchildren, and potentially, 7 generations further, unless we bring ourselves, educate ourselves on how this occurs, be clear that this is the science, and then do whatever it takes for us to mitigate it so it doesn't continue. A lot of times in our struggle, some of our greatest revolutionaries, some of our greatest liberators died because of poor health, because of the diet that has been handed down throughout history, and because of this epigenetic effect that is we carry in our genes. So we can do something about it. This is internal repair, and we want to leave our children with a ability to maximize and actualize the best that they have to bring to the world.
Sister Lisa, 60
Right.
seconds.
I'm going to see if I can just share this a moment, and you can tell me if you all see it or not. You see this? You see it?
Yes, recent advances.
I just want to make people
Okay.
aware of this. This is a document that was put together by countries from all over the world. Incidentally enough, when I'm looking at the countries that were putting this together, I didn't see a lot of African countries listed in this. That was really interesting to me. But still, it is about recent advances toward validating efficacy and safety of African traditional medicines. And I just want people to at least be aware of the kind of work that is going on. Actually, they've always been doing this kind of work. They've just never, ever given African people or other indigenous people credit for anything wherever they go. But the pharmaceutical industry, a lot of what they take, a lot of what they use is from looting the resources of other people, stealing their information, and trying to make them feel absolutely inferior. I think one of the best things that can happen for us in terms of what we can do is to reawaken to the realization of our people, our way, and to understand that there are medical systems. Under one medical system, if somebody controls the rules and the dynamics of how something is set up, you're going to get one result. But when you open that up, when you begin to think in terms of different medical systems, then you're going to get different results. I think one of the greatest things that we could do right now is to be reawakened to the power of Africa, to their way of healing, the traditional way of healing, which is respect for our life, respect for the earth that we live in, respect for the air, respect for the environment as a whole and how we live in it. I think that's very important. I think it's very important for us to begin to embrace that, because then it will help to direct us more in terms of our solutions, and to know that you don't have to go through this journey by yourself, especially if you're on this call and you're listening to this. We want to build up this commission so that we can truly be there for our people, not just in an ideal sense, but even on the ground, boots on the ground. We want to really build this up and understand this is not just, we're not just talking, because this is just coming from a proud African person. Of that, of course, I am that. But I am talking about evidence. I am talking about science. But I'm not talking about Franken-science or science that's based on a racist, colonialist, Eurocentric view that destroyed everybody and makes you accept what they're doing because they have guns to our heads, guns and bombs, which they can just blow up the world. That, we can't continue to accept that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you all so much. And especially from the point of making the emphasis that even though Onaje is now a doctor,
yes,
he's making sure that he's not the medical doctor and that we need to get the experts from each stage of life and from each specialty to do this. So the charge is, from what I've heard, is that we need to organize our medical professionals around the 5 injury areas and around helping our self-repair to bring them into the reparations movement so that we can move forward and heal ourselves. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I'll just will tie it up with the bow, and that is the United Nations Decade for People of African Descent from 2015 to 2024 says 3 principles: recognition, justice, and development. We have the blueprint. There's the formula right there. Every conversation we should have those 3 aspects tied to it so we can raise our people's consciousness, so we can get into action and make the demand. Because without a demand, there will be no reparations.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. We appreciate you all, and we will see you boots on the ground, as Sister Lisa said. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sante Sana.
Sante Sana.
Sakitu. All right, folks. So now we are moving to a video. And I put it in the chat already for those to prepare everyone to who the video is going to be about, and who's showing the video. And we're going to have this in 1 second for you. And the video is from the I Am Institute by Anana, Fofie, Bashir. So let's get that ready for you all. I Am Institute's presenting a video by Anana, Fofie, Bashir. To know who she is, look in the chat. There's a link so you get a description of how this sister is dealing with the self-reparations and internal repair. Oh, no, here we go. I'm sorry.
Hello, NCOBRA, and thank you so much for welcoming us, the Institute for Ashe Movement, to present and speak to you all during your conference today. We are honored to be among, even virtually, this incredible gathering. We are here and happy to be here to speak because, of course, we see our missions and our values as intrinsically connected. The Institute for Ashe Movement, like the case for reparations, is about healing and repair, grounded in how we know we continue to connect and be connected through our African indigeneity, through our history, through our roots, through our culture. The Institute for Ashe Movement comprises leaders in emerging work of healing, arts, and transformation through therapy, through the various ways that we know that therapy takes place. The Institute for Ashe Movement integrates healing arts grounded in African Indigenous dance and movement, with expressive arts therapy, narrative talk therapy, with counselors, social workers, artists, and professionally certified educators and scholars who are on our board, among our clinical staff, and who are friends and supporters of the Institute. We have to begin by giving honor and shouting out our founder, Dr. Marshall Lee. Dr. Marshall Nkononi Lee is the visionary for the Institute, understanding the need as a practitioner of both the African Indigenous systems, as an initiate through the Lakumi tradition, and as a psychologist. The need to bridge both of these healing systems for those of us in the diaspora who are living here. The Institute understands, we understand, that we need culturally resonant therapy that addresses the mind, the body, and the spirit. And to do that, we need therapy that, of course, takes the whole mind, body, spirit into consideration, but also the systems in which we live. And so understanding that reparations have to come in many forms. And part of that is making sure that we are hopefully getting support, but making sure that we're offering culturally resonant therapy that does not solely individualize our problems within us, certainly not just within our mind, but within the fullness of us and the wholeness, again, of our generational historical and personal trauma. And of course, therapy is not just for coming to deal with some trauma. It's hopefully also to be able to expand in the vision of who we want to be in the fullness of our healing liberation. My name is Nana Fofie. Thank you so much for the introduction. Nana Fofie Amina Bashir. I have a much longer name than that, actually. I am an expressive art therapist, a coach, counselor, and I am an Akamfo Penin. That would be a senior Akamfo in the Akom tradition of West Africa. My lineage is of Somalia and Ghana, and I name in my teachers here, who include Dr. Marshall Lee, and also Nana NCOBRA Queen, where I studied in my tradition. One of the things that makes the Institute different is not only our dedication to evidence-based therapies that are, again, culturally resonant, that are taking the whole person, the whole environment into consideration, but it is also the fact that we are practiced in both. Dr. Lee, as the clinical director and founder, myself, and others on our board and staff are practitioners, long-term practitioners of both the Western forms of psychology, but also grounded in our African indigenous traditions. And when we say evidence-based, we are calling upon the evidence not only from the research of the Western psychology, but the evidence of the wisdom of millennia of African indigenous healing systems. And so to do this, we call in and bridge the gap, offering African indigenous dance, which is what we now call in the Western world somatic therapies, forms of somatic therapies. And this is dance groups, dance movements, therapeutic movement, excuse me, with live drums, understanding that the rhythm is just as much a part of the healing as the movement, understanding that the energy of the group and making sure that we're bringing in movements that we do in our dance group to the personalized therapy are really able to call in a wisdom in our body that clients may not otherwise be able to examine solely through a narrative or a talk therapy. We do this understanding the importance of providing this to all in our community. We are located in historic Gertown in New Orleans, Louisiana, working through the campus of Xavier University, a historically Black institution. So while our primary focus, of course, is always to honor the community where we live and where we serve, we also have now expanded and are able to do teletherapy, where we're able to offer these services virtually throughout the state of Louisiana. Some of our offerings, as you will see, include dance groups, men's, women's recovery groups. They include healing art stories, storytelling circles, and many other ways that we go into the community and work with our artists, our residents, and everyone in need. We offer play therapy, couples and partners therapy, and family therapy. We work with elders and youth and everyone in between. Our staff comprises, again, of social workers, marriage and family therapists, licensed professional counselors, and psychologists. I myself am an expressive arts therapist. And what does that mean? That means I specifically chose that route as a dual licensed, for dual licensure for the marriage and family therapy and a licensed professional counselor, because I knew that my therapy had to be grounded in the body and in the arts. And so along with other psychotherapeutic ways and psychodynamic ways of working with therapy, all the wisdom that comes through creative expression, multimodal arts, come through in my work. As you will see, we have been working with, we had dance director Andrea Peoples, who choreographed an incredible, what we call the Ashe Pantheon. The ways that we are pulling from the wisdom of the movements to African spirituality and deities. And where does that call and where does that name in our body, where we are on our progress of transformation? All of these things are connected wisdom.
My heart goes out, like all of our viewers, my heart
And
goes
so through the Institute for Ashe movement, we want to continue to move this forward. The tie of healing, reparations, liberation, and therapy, they are again intrinsically connected. What our hope is that we can join together in making sure that as we continue to destigmatize therapy for our African and Black communities and throughout the diaspora, we're also honoring the reasons that some of that stigma was there. We know that there was medical harm, but there continues to be medical and psychological harm in our communities. And so how do we make sure that we're offering in a way that, again, does not just pathologize the individual, but that looks at the healing that is needed in our whole mind, body, and spirit, as well as in connection with the healing that is needed in the systems in which we reside. We welcome any questions, any continued conversation, and just give thanks again for allowing us to be here today. Thank you.
Wow, that was I was very for someone who's a practitioner myself of the Akan tradition, and she mentioned Nana Parabia. That was very moving for me. But also, I think it's important to know that, you know, there's a saying that Africans didn't have psychologists and all these other things because we had ritual, we had dancing, we had singing, and you know, those things are healing modalities that we don't necessarily tap into anymore. And that presentation is a representation of our way and how we heal ourselves when, you know, no one else, how we heal ourselves internally without there being an intermediary. And then if there is an intermediary needed, then that's a different step. But again, that begins with the culture. When you have a healing culture, which is what we're missing, that's where, you know, we are not able to move as well as we would like to. That's the same thing where we're trying to be as resilient as possible while we're going through all that we're going through. And I just found that this video just reminds me of how much more I need to dance. I mean, I don't like to brag, but I'm pretty good dancer. I mean, I am. Could ask people, they'll tell you. No, Capra dancing, guys. It is what it is. But anyway, as we move forward, we have Sister Nia Campinha-Bacote. Did I say it correctly, sis?
Nia Campinha-Bacote.
Oh, Campinha-Bacote. Okay, I was close. Welcome, sis. And I turn it over to you. And I appreciate looking for what you're presenting for us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I know we're all in this virtual world and webinars, so we can't see all of each other's faces, but I very much feel the energy and the warmth, and I am honored and humbled to be here. And before I actually start sharing any information about this presentation, I actually wanted to embody a bit of what the organization I work for, Community Healing Network, is about. And so to do that, I just want a simple moment of grounding ourselves. Because I don't know about you all, but you may have been sitting in a chair for a really long time. Maybe you've stood up, maybe you've moved, maybe you haven't. And so I just want to ground us a little bit. And so I'm going to do that just by simply inviting us to breathe individually where we are, and also just collectively knowing that we are together. So you can feel free to keep your eyes open, gently close your eyes, and I just invite you to relax. Let your shoulders, if there's been tension, if you've been noticing that you've been leaning over, however you may be sitting, if it's accessible to you to sit or stand, just whatever feels most comfortable for your body. And I'm just going to invite us to take 3 deep breaths. So breathe in with me and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. One more time, the biggest breath you've taken all day today. And release. If your eyes were closed, you can go ahead and open them now. I hope that was just a brief moment of pause, just to know that you are here, you are grounded, and we are all here together in this space. So as was shared, my name is Nia Campinha-Bacote, and I have the privilege of having recently been hired on as the community manager for Community Healing Network. It was referenced earlier in a presentation we just heard. And Community Healing Network is a nonprofit that is based out of New Haven, Connecticut. Our primary focus is to see the emotional emancipation of Black and Afro-diasporic communities worldwide. Our aim is to cultivate communities that are truly well, truly healthy, and truly whole. And we believe that this is only possible when we defy the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority, and we instead embrace the truth of Black humanity. You all might be familiar with this, but on June 17th, 2021, just under a week ago, President Joe Biden passed a bill entitled the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act. It made Juneteenth a federally recognized holiday. Within hours of this bill being passed, I came across a post widely being shared on my social media networks. It was from a Black woman and poet, essayist, and organizer named Ariel Marie. Her post said this, quote, "Gaslighting is making Juneteenth a federal holiday while simultaneously banning critical race theory in schools, destabilizing COVID mutual aid efforts, refusing to defund and abolish police, and blocking reparations legislation. Go play in someone else's face, America." End quote. Regardless of what we may be feeling about this now federally recognized holiday, the truth remains that our nation finally deciding to celebrate the physical emancipation of African Americans from the inhumane creation of chattel slavery does not equate to the invaluable work of emotional emancipation. And that is what is needed within our communities when we talk about reparations. As a member of NCOBRA, Community Healing Network subscribes to the definition of reparations as full repair. That includes financial, political, educational repair and repayment, as well as emotional and internal reparations. So before I share more generally on the topic of healing and emotional reparations and more about what our organization tangibly does to make manifest emotional healing and reparations, I want to share a part of my life story because I believe that my story speaks to the imperative nature of the work of emotional emancipation. So again, as I shared, my name is Nia Campinha-Bacote. I am the daughter of Dexter and Josepha Campinha-Bacote. I am the granddaughter of Mina and Joseph Campinha and Essie and Dexter Bacote. Though my ancestral roots stem from Haiti and the islands of Cabo Verde, I was born and raised on the unceded lands of the Shawnee and Miami peoples, colonially known as Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up well off. I was well-resourced financially and familially. I grew up in a two-parent household, both of my parents having received their doctoral degrees, my father receiving a medical degree, my mother receiving her doctorate in psychiatric nursing. I myself classically trained on the piano in all advanced placement classes, president of my high school's National Honor Society, 4.5 GPA, getting in early decision to my top Ivy League choice, Brown University. I was pretty much the poster child of success and achievement as defined in the United States. Nowadays, I think people would describe me and my family as the epitome of #Black excellence. That excellence being, of course, in Western terms of what success means. It wasn't until I got to college and I took an introductory Africana Studies course when I began to understand the internal toll of living in this country as a Black woman. You see, earlier I didn't explicitly name this, but you might not be surprised to learn that where I grew up, I was often the only Black girl in all of my advanced classes, the only Black girl that I knew who could play the piano, the only Black girl in my church's youth group, the only Black family that lived on the block. I was regularly called an Oreo, Black on the outside, white on the inside, because of the way that I talked and the way that I carried myself. Because apparently, somewhere in my 18 years of living in Ohio, I had subconsciously learned and believed that Black people inherently carry themselves in ways that portray laziness, ignorance, and lack of confidence. I did not realize how much I had internalized and idolized the right way, or the white way, until this Africana Studies course that I told you about, that I took my freshman year of college. We were reading a piece of prose by Langston Hughes, and he described an encounter he had with one of his students. His student came up to him and said, Professor, I don't want to be a Negro poet. I just want to be a poet. I remember going up to my professor and thinking the exact same thing and having such a similar encounter, going up and saying, Professor, I don't understand what's wrong with what Langston Hughes' student is saying. I don't want to be Black. I just want to be human. My professor took in my query, and after a moment of silence, he responded with a question that has never left me. Nia, he said, what are you defining as Negro? What does being Black mean to you? And that's when a light switch turned on. A light switch that had been hidden and covered for 18 years by striving to be accepted and successful. In that moment, I realized that I had come to see Blackness as analogous with inferior. I grew up in spaces where I really rarely saw Black people in spaces and places of leadership or authority. Where I went to school, Black kids were the ones who were getting expelled and in the lowest levels of the academic courses. My 18 years in suburbia had resulted in seeing me as the quote unquote good type of Black person. You know, the one with long straight hair, which you might not believe now, but long straight hair, perfect grammar, high SAT scores. I didn't want to be Black because that identifier had come to mean to me ignorant, delinquent, subhuman. As I continued to take that Africana Studies course, I began to learn about the historical, systemic, and systematic ways in which entire communities of African Americans have been neglected, mal-resourced, and manipulated through policies such as redlining, in which Black folk were prohibited from being approved from housing mortgages in particular neighborhoods. And then I continued to learn about the subsequent consequences of policies such as redlining, such as lack of educational opportunities, food, job, health security. The list goes on. More and more light switches began to be turned on for me as I realized that rather than believing the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority, I not only wanted, but needed to embrace the truth of my humanity found in my Blackness. I started that journey back in 2011. It's now been 10 years. I'm about to turn 28, and I'm still learning and unlearning so many things. I am a living testimony to the importance of internal healing and emotional reparations. In the context of the American dream, I was the poster child for success, and yet I was also the poster child for what it meant to be a Black person in America arrested by internalized racism and deeply entrenched anti-Blackness. The allure of white America and its incessant whispering, declaring whiteness as superior and Blackness as inferior was so deceitful and cunning. I believed the lie without even knowing. Dr. Maya Angelou once said, "I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better. Now that I, Nia, know better, I do better. Now I know that I could have all the money and success as defined by American values, education in the world, and yet still not be able to fully flourish, to be fully and truly well, healthy, and whole without learning to defy the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority, and to instead choose to embrace the truth of my humanity as a Black woman. This is what the work of emotional emancipation is about. And this is why I am a part of Community Healing Network. And this is why I am here speaking before you all on this virtual Zoom webinar to talk about the importance and centrality of emotional reparations. Reparations are here. Reparations can't wait. This refrain was repeated over and over and over again on a recently uploaded video on NCOBRA's website. Reparations are here and reparations can't wait. The time for full healing, for full repair, for reparations is now. It is crucial that we fight for financial and educational and political reparations and equity, because we could have all of the emotional health in the world, but if our people are constantly stuck in cycles of poverty because of unjust housing laws and other policies based on the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority, we would not be able to fully flourish as a community. And I'm here to say that the same can be said for emotional reparations. We could have all of the money in the world, billions of dollars and resources, and still be stuck in cycles of poverty because we have yet to extricate ourselves from the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority that we have internalized. The images that we see of our people on media dehumanizing Black men and women, defining us as criminals and manipulative welfare queens, while simultaneously uplifting whiteness as the standard of perfection, beauty, and worth. Those lies are damaging, and we unknowingly and even sometimes knowingly choose to ingest it. Whether we came from a two-parent household with a privileged Western education, or if we grew up in a foster care system and found gang banging as the only loyal sense of family and belonging that we'd ever experienced, being formed in this country that has racially traumatized an entire group of people for over 4 centuries has deeply impacted our ability to love ourselves and one another. When these avenues of love and trust are impaired, cycles of violence and oppression can manifest within our own communities. Moreover, when our ability to love and trust ourselves and one another is dysfunctional, our communities and organizations also begin to reflect that dysfunction as well. And we begin to struggle within our own organizations to communicate and collaborate with one another. Reparations are here. Reparations can't wait. Reparations are now. Currently, we are waiting on the House of Representatives to pass our HR 40 bill. We're making calls to representatives to vote in favor of taking a step toward finally giving Black Americans reparations for the MAFA, known as the Atlantic slave trade. We are waiting on white people in power to decide to pour money back into our communities, and we are fighting for policy changes that embrace the truth of Black humanity. These things are important, and yet something that we don't have to wait on, something that we don't have to ask for white people in power for permission to do, is the work of emotional healing and reparations. We can do the work of emotional emancipation now because we as Black Americans have the power and the agency to say yes to engaging in the work of emotional reparations. Community Healing Network is leading the charge to build a global grassroots movement for the emotional emancipation, healing, wellness, and empowerment of Black people. New York Times bestselling author Resmaa Menakem speaks to what it takes to build a movement and change culture, as he writes, quote, "Changing culture will take a lot of time and effort. The Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts have their own cultures. The National Rifle Association has a culture. Even the Ku Klux Klan has a culture, one that has lasted for over 150 years. Each of these organizations have something in common. They have elders, rituals, symbols, uniforms. They have shared terminology and language and stories. They have an explanation of the world and their place in it. End quote. Community Healing Network is committed to the work that it takes to change and create culture. And to do just that, we have created a comprehensive program for emotional repair for Black people that includes our signature initiative that was referenced earlier called the Emotional Emancipation Circle, also known as EE Circles. EE Circles were developed in collaboration with our principal ally, the Association of Black Psychologists. And these are in no way intended to replace professional counseling or therapy in the video that we saw earlier. But instead, what EE Circles are psychologically sound, African-centered, community-driven, self-help support groups that enable Black people to share our stories and feelings, deepen our understanding of the impact of our history on our emotions, to detoxify our minds and spirits, to practice essential emotional wellness skills, and to develop strategies to free ourselves, our children, and the world from the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority. Our EE Circles uplift the African principle of Ubuntu, I am because we are, a principle that Desmond Tutu has said points to the truth that, quote, an individual's humanity is inextricably bound up in the humanity of the larger community. Through storytelling and vulnerability, shared trust is built over time in EE Circles, and participants not only grow in their understanding of our history as a people, but we also prioritize developing and sharing strategies for dealing with neutralizing racial, micro, and macro aggressions. Sankofa is another African principle that guides our EE Circles, the concept of going back and getting what was lost. EE Circles center the work of retrieving our cultural past, acknowledging the Mafa, and defining at personal and collective levels what we carry forward and what we leave behind. We ask questions such as, who am I? And how did I come to know that this is who I am? Who are my people? How do I relate to the spirit that is me, within me, surrounds and uplifts me and grounds me in the work that I feel I am called to do on this earth? And moreover, Community Healing Network organizes Community Healing Days, an annual celebration that happens every third weekend of October to raise awareness about the need to put emotional reparations at the top of global Black communities' agenda, to celebrate our resilience and also increase our solidarity as a people. In thinking about changing culture, we need a uniform. So what is our uniform? The uniform for this movement is to wear sky blue, which was actually called for by Dr. Maya Angelou in 2013. As she said, sky blue symbolizes our collective determination to turn the pain of the blues into the sky blue of unlimited possibilities. Ultimately, our goal, our intention, something we hold deeply inside of us is the belief that 2020 to 2030 will be the decade in which we as a people embrace the truth of Black humanity. And we hope that you will join us. As CHN founder and president Enola Aird says, we are escaping from the century-old narrative grounded in the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority. And we are mobilizing Black people to write a renewed African narrative driven by the truth of Black humanity. Come with us. Many have already joined us, as we, alongside the Association of Black Psychologists, have trained more than 1,000 EE Circle facilitators and have planted seeds for EE Circles throughout the US in cities such as Ferguson, Baltimore, Washington, Richmond, Oakland, Los Angeles, New Orleans, and even internationally in places such as Cuba, the United Kingdom, South Africa, and Haiti. That is the informational portion of my presentation. And in alignment with what our organization is about, I also want to end our time with another breathing exercise that is a little bit more intentional than how we started, and also incorporating a little bit of music. So if you would join me, I want to bring your attention to know that when we think about breath, that is something that is so important. It is our life source. It is what connects us to each other, to our ancestors, to the divine. And so physically what's happening is we will be breathing in for 2 counts, and then we will be breathing out for 4 counts. And the biological, biochemistry reasoning behind this is because inhalation is what raises or activates our nervous system, while exhalation, when we slow down, is what is tied to our sympathetic nervous system, and it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which relaxes us. And so this is an offering from Community Healing Network to you all as something that you can use in moments that you might feel stressed, in moments when you're combating the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority, and you are choosing to embrace the truth of your Black humanity. And so I'm going to invite us for about a minute to engage in breathing in deeply for 2 inhales, and then breathing out for 4 beats. So again, if it is accessible to you, I encourage you to sit upright, if possible, feet flat on the ground. Whatever feels comfortable for you, closing your eyes, softening your gaze. I know that there has been a lot of information, a lot of storytelling that's been going on. And so you can feel free to just place your hands softly on your thighs. And would you breathe in with me for 2 counts? 1, 2. Briefly pause at the top and breathe out for 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in for 1, 2. Pause. Out for 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in 1, 2. Pause. Breathe out 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to invite you to continue on your own count, breathing in for 2 beats, pausing, breathing out for 4, feeling your body settling, as I will share a song to breathe with for 1 minute, and then we can move into a time of question. So continue breathing in, 2, pause, out, 2.
Breathe it in, let it out, breathe it in, let it go. Breathe it in, let it out, breathe it in, let it go. Breathe it in, let it out, breathe it in, let it go. Breathe it in, let it out, breathe it in, let it go. Breathe it in, let it out, breathe it in, let it go. Breathe it in, let it out, breathe it in, let it go. Breathe it in, let it out, breathe it in, let it go. Breathe it in, let it out, breathe it in, let it go.
I invite you, if your eyes were closed, to open them. Feel free to move your hands, arms. I hope and pray that that was a blessing, and please use that throughout the day whenever you feel need to be settled. And that's just part of the work of emotional healing and internal and emotional reparations, and emotional emancipation. So thank you all so much. And I know there will be a time for question and answer. And in full transparency, I want to let you all know that I just started working with Community Healing Network 2 weeks ago. So I will do my best to answer questions to the best of my ability, but want to acknowledge there's a lot that I'm learning and growing in. So thank you all so much.
Wow, that was impressive. That was impressive. I feel energized. I feel more refreshed because as a co-chair for this event, trust me, I need to breathe because woo, it's a lot going on. It's a lot going on. It's a lot going on. So I have one question to chat so far, and that question is, what does emotional emancipation look like?
Yes, so that is a very great question. And so, you know, part of the reason why trying to share my story is to give kind of a tangible example of how moving from a place of actually not even understanding the fullness of truth for what my humanity found in my Blackness was. And so being emotionally emancipated meant for me to actually be able to go into spaces, right? I still sometimes am in majority white spaces, but I now understand my worth and my value. And so I'm able to understand boundaries that I can create. I'm able to understand in my body what I'm feeling sometimes when I'm feeling the need to perform or to exude something, and checking in with myself and saying, hey, how can I be authentic to the truth that I am beautiful and that I'm worthy and that I am here? And so being emotionally emancipated in that way, and how I understand it, having worked with this organization thus far, is the idea of being able to walk in that truth and confidence and understanding. It's also learning about our history and our backgrounds and living that out fully in community. So I hope that kind of gets at it. Let me know if there's a follow-up question, if I can be more clear or give more specificity around it. One last thing I will say is our mission at Community Healing Network and our vision is to be in a world in which all Black people have moved beyond surviving to flourishing. And so the modality in which we do that, instead of thinking, oh, we're always in a struggle, we're always going to be struggling, is through these emotional emancipation circles, coming together, sharing our stories, unlearning the lie and embracing the truth. And that is shifting us from saying, oh, I don't have to struggle. I don't have to feel like every day is a crisis that I'm trying to survive, but I'm actually flourishing because I understand the fullness of who I am and whose I am, and also in what communities I have that is empowering and flowing in and through me.
Wow, that's interesting, because it makes me think, and I've come across this before, when you said about crisis and living in crisis. And I wonder, you know, myself personally, I wonder if I became a disaster preparedness coach and instructor, just to be like, all right, I'm gonna deal with crisis and be prepared for everything. The apocalypse, you know. So it made me think about that, and I was like, wow, I wonder how I dealt with stress and crisis and trauma. Is like, hey, you know what? I'm prepared for the apocalypse, so everything else can't bother me. Oh, that's not the apocalypse? I'm good. Oh, that's not a nuclear meltdown? I'm good. Hurricane? I'm good. So yeah, I appreciate that. That was very insightful for me personally. I hope it was for other folks as well. So we're gonna go to some more questions. In the chat, I'm looking, someone says, what is your parents' reaction to your enlightenment? Like, did they like want to, you know, disown you? Did they say, what's your problem? Are you on drugs? I mean, what they say?
This is something that I also want to lift up about emotional emancipation work. It is not just individual, but it is communal. And so I say that because at first, I'm not gonna lie, it's rough. It was rough because not everybody is on the same path at the same journey at the same time. So I used to have straight hair that was relaxed. I was doing like a Brazilian treatment, and my hair went all the way down, halfway down my back straight. In 2016 now, I shaved off all my hair. And I remember my mom, so my mom is Cape Verdean, and she saw that and she was like, wow, I noticed that you cut off all your hair. Why did you do that? And a little bit, not the most supportive. It's just kind of rough, and my parents, it's also a time where I'm just graduating college and they're trying to basically be like, you're your own person, you make your own decisions. And so it was kind of,
Not like that.
We were still,
not that.
And, my hair is growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm wearing it in a full fro, and they're kind of like, oh, we didn't really raise a daughter to do that. But what I will say, and this is going back to, is also the work of individual and collective. I don't think we can take one without the other. I stand before you today to say that actually, as I began to be emotionally emancipated, I started having conversations with my parents about what I had thought about and what I had learned and what I had internalized. And I was able to start asking questions about, why did you, make decisions that you did, and realizing, wow, wait, their decisions to kind of uplift white superior culture was not necessarily, out of their own thoughts of anti-Blackness, but what was internalized in them as well. And so it actually began an unbreaking and unlearning of generations of this trauma and of this internalized anti-Blackness. And so a fun fact and testimony I will say is I actually gave this presentation as my practice run with my parents earlier today. And
oh, wow.
So proud of you, because I was like, I'm gonna be talking about y'all. But they're so proud of me and so grateful for me. And definitely, as I have been on this journey, they have been joining in. And so I think that's why I'm so committed to working with the organization Community Healing Network, because this isn't just for me, but because of how much I have experienced the goodness and wellness. I think about this, my faith background is a follower of Christ. And so just as excited as I get about loving Jesus and telling people about that, if people are interested or wondering, I also think about that with this work. I have been freed emotionally and I'm on this journey, but I want others to experience that as well. And I think when I'm able to step up, and I've seen, just even seeing little Black girls who live in my neighborhood. I live in a predominantly Black neighborhood now, and just seeing the face and just joy and wanting to be a role model and a model and a mentor to those as well. So that is so much the journey of, even with my own family and the emotional emancipation, my journey has impacted them as well.
Wow, that's powerful, because the shaving off the hair is a big thing for Black women, because Black women in hair, that's natural, relaxed, whatever. Sisters in their hair, that's a big deal. So what's next for you, Sister Nia? What's next?
What's next for me is to continue growing in this organization. I just recently got my Master of Divinity from Yale Divinity School. And so something that has been very important for me, thinking that I was going to be on the journey of perhaps working professionally and paid and vocationally in the church as a pastor, loving to preach, loving to, spiritually nourish communities. And I came across this organization, Community Healing Network, and I honestly started crying because I felt the Holy Spirit at work in this organization that is committed to the work that I feel is related to what the embodiment of the divine is, to see ourselves fully and wholly as reflections of the divine, Imago Dei. And so just seeing this organization and learning about it and getting plugged in, it's, locally here in New Haven, Connecticut, where I've lived for the past 6 years, and excited for how it's also a global network. And so I'm just really excited to get on the ground as we're able to gather more in person, be together at conferences, hopefully, to help facilitate these emotional emancipation circles, to help organize the, October annual celebration Community Healing Days. I'm excited to see this work of reparations internally really take hold and take root, especially among my generation as well. So I'm really excited for that. That's what's next.
That's excellent. That's good to hear. Now I'm looking at the chat. Let me see. We have some more questions. How did you find Community Health Network, or how did they find you, and how do you prepare for the work you're doing? I think you expressed that, but I think they want to hear it again.
Well, one, I will actually say it was actually felt like a divine intervention. As I said, I've been living in New Haven for 6 years, and during the pandemic, I got very involved in community activism in my neighborhood. And the city of New Haven decided to sell a park for $1 to a land developing company. And it's the only park in our community which is neglected and seen as the unsafe, part of town. And I got connected with a bunch of Black folk in the community, and there was an elder in our community, and this woman, Miss Dottie, she connected with me, and we talked on the phone for maybe 30 minutes. And I just, we were just talking, getting to know each other. And months later, in November of 2020, she emailed me and she said, I know I've only met you for 30 minutes on the phone. We haven't ever met in person, but this organization seems in alignment with what you're passionate about. You might want to apply. And so I read the description, and that's when I had tears come down my face. Like, oh my goodness, this work is the work that I didn't even know I felt like I was created to be doing. And so applied. And also Anola Aird, who is the CEO and founder of Community Healing Network, actually facilitated a small example of an emotional emancipation circle for the Yale Black Seminarians, which was the group, the all Black affinity group that I was a part of at Yale Divinity School. And so I didn't even know that I had met the founder of this organization months earlier. So that's why I couldn't say no to these opportunities and being a part of this community, because it was just all aligning. And so I just feel like my life experiences and having conversations with Anola, reading a lot of resources and articles and just a lot of research is helping me become more and more prepared for this work that I'm doing now.
Okay, I mean, here's another question. I'm just trying to take it in and trying to. Is it emotional essential circle or is it emotional emancipation circle?
It is. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, then they say the third weekend in October, we celebrate Caravan to the Ancestors, Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Arizona.
Oh, wow. Look, I guess the third weekend of October is a very, very important one, very meaningful and significant. Yeah, that's the weekend that we also celebrate the Community Healing Days. And it is EEC, which stands for Emotional Emancipation Circle. So think about emancipation as in freedom, liberation. So that's what the
Juneteenth
stands for. Yes.
Juneteenth.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm still looking in the chat for questions. If not, I'll ask if you don't have any.
Did she save the park?
I'm sorry?
There's a question in the chat. Did she save the park?
Oh my gosh, man, you know what? I remember organizing with so many people. I had all my neighbors call, and unfortunately, because basically what we had to do was we had to get all of the different people, all the older people who are over each district, and there are 24 districts, and the older people, I mean, this is, I don't want to go into too long about it, but this was the idea of the lies that we're being told. So even in our own communities, we're being told that that park is just drug dealers are there, that it's not safe, that there's violence there. But the reason why, if we go internally, why that's existing is because the city has neglected, has not picked up the trap. It's actually not it's a city park. The city is supposed to clean that park. The city is supposed to put lighting on that park, and they did not. And so it just created this cycle of our park being neglected. And unfortunately, a lot of the leaders who voted for this kind of policy decided to replace the park with affordable housing. And I think that's something that was just really difficult because there's so much need. And I'm not at all against affordable housing. We need that as well, but we shouldn't have to choose between clean air and breathing space and affordable housing for people experiencing homelessness. And so unfortunately, the park was not safe, though it's still there. I haven't seen any construction workers go, I'd be out there when they try to come holding some flowers being like, this is our park. But yeah, so as of now, the stopping of it did not happen, but I learned a lot and gained a lot of community through that.
I mean, people are really responding to you, and they're talking about this is the next movement. This is where we need to go. This is how we need to move. So do you have any suggestions for what we can do tomorrow, today?
Today. Well,
9 o'clock tonight. What's your instructions? What's your instructions?
The instructions, I would say breathe first and foremost.
Okay.
Breathe and paying attention to actually what's going on in your body, where you're feeling this excitement, because I think our body actually cues us into a lot of what we're feeling. Are we feeling tightness? Are we feeling, what are we feeling and thinking about and remembering these moments and remembering how energized we feel, while also realizing, right, this is, I think we think about this is something that takes time. This is a marathon, not necessarily like a sprint, but also, again, we're not believing that we will always, like, our identity is not to struggle. Actually, our identity is to be free and whole and healthy and full. So a lot of what I think could be the next steps to kind of gather around could definitely be, speaking from my perspective, working with Community Healing Network, definitely feel free to check out our website, communityhealingnetwork.org. I really hope that's, you can see I'm very new, so I will make sure I'll put the actual in the chat.
It says a lot for you to be new and them to feel confident to send you out as a representative. So please don't be like, I'm new and no. Obviously, whatever you're doing that's new is enough for them to say, sis, go ahead, represent us. Yes. Last question, and I'm gonna wrap this up. What needs to be done to get more youth involved in the reparations struggle and to educate themselves? And I'm assuming that means self-repair. I'm only assuming that's what it means.
Yeah, and I want to also uplift again. I think so much of this stuff is interconnected. So I don't think we can really have one without the other. I think when we start becoming more emotionally repaired and healed, we begin to see, oh my gosh, these structures and the ways that payment is working and the financial inequity that's happening. I can't stand for this anymore. And that actually begins to have us even be more involved for the work of physical reparations, financial policy, different things like that. Because so often if we're just thinking like, well, this is what it is, we're just always going to be like this, and this is just our identity, we might not actually want to be on the ground fighting for other reparations. So I want to say, I feel as though all of this work is together. And similarly, we can't, if we're always just fighting for, the physical things, that we can actually burn out emotionally and internally. And maybe we get the money, but we're actually not even alive because of heart conditions, diabetes, whatever is going on. Thinking about the health commission, you can think so much about food deserts that we live in and just our own bodily health. So to answer that question though, about, how can we get other younger generations involved, that's actually something that I'm trying to work with and think about and think through with Enola here at Community Healing Network, because I think a lot of it has to do with language. So how we can get folks feeling comfortable with language that we're using around this work. And also just, I'm gonna be honest, like, the way that we promote and trying to get on different levels of Instagram. I'm still out here trying to learn TikTok. There's a way that people are seeing things. And so how can we actually bring these messages to where people are and meet them with the language kind of that they're using, or at least giving explanation into the language that we're using? Because, for example, I could say sky blue is the color, but if they don't know the history behind that and the connection with Dr. Maya Angelou, there's a disconnect there. So I think there's a lot of just relation and community building and trying to bridge, meeting them where they're at, as well as bringing them to see what the work that has been going on for centuries and for generations, and have that collaboration happen together.
Wow. Is there a word beyond thank you? Asante Sana, Madasi. Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure, and we will be sure definitely to look for your name with your purpose, Nia.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. And be sure, you have, what's your information? What's the best way to reach you and communicate with you?
Yes, I will put my email address in the chat. It's through the Community Healing Network. I'll put that in the chat.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nia.
Thank you so much for having me. Blessings.
All righty. Now, last and certainly not least, we have Sister Anana. Now, I must say that I had to read up on Sister Anana because our secretary of NCOBRA made sure to tell me, look, this sister here. I was like, yeah, okay, she's like, no, you gotta, and so I've been doing some reading. I'm like, wow, okay, this self-care thing is a whole other level that she's talking about. And everyone is bringing all these different multi-dimensional, faceted ways in how we need to heal. And it's so important that, just like you have a doctor for your feet, and the ear, nose, and throat doctor, and the dentist with your teeth. What I'm learning today is that there's multiple ways that we need to heal, and there's multiple modalities, and there's multiple specialties. So I think it's real important that we all remember that we are multifaceted, multidimensional people, and where some of us are really healed and really exceptional in one place, and other places we may be really suffering or really debilitated and need to heal. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Anana Johari Parris.
Thank you so much. Let me just say that Sister Nia, you just spread all types of honey and love and revolution on the screen for all of us, and I'm lucky to be able to absorb what you offered, sis. So I definitely hope we get to connect. And I also want to say thank you. I know it's the end of a powerful day, and I'm also appreciative of those who are hanging in there still. My name is Anana Johari Harris. As others have introduced themselves, I'm also here as a representative of my parents, Kathleen Asada Albert and Herjit Sababu Dean Harris, grandparents, great-grandparents. We are Louisiana folk, both sides, all the way back. And I was raised Pan-African. My parents met on Southern University's campus and were a part of leading the movement work the year that the students were shot and killed, and were subsequently, they were both kicked out of Southern University. So my household was comprised of activism being intertwined in everything, education, cultural arts, and then math and science, because my father is an engineer. So I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of framing of who I am and how I'm showing up today. And I want to talk to you all about strategic self-care. So I'm going to share my screen. And the way that I'm going to move forward, if we were in person, of course, I would love to get permission from an elder. So if anybody wants to unmute and please give me permission to move forward, I would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, permission.
Thank you so much. Because we are at the end of a session, what I'm going to do is share a lot of good information with you. It's going to be a framing. It's going to be a way for you to walk away and actually apply some practices, apply some activities into your organizations. And then I also want you to not just engage in the chat, but ask very specific questions that allow me to dig in and hopefully help others at the same time. All right, can everybody see this? Somebody, can you affirm that for me? Everybody see my screen, my presentation?
Yes.
All right. Awesome, I'm verbally.
I'm sorry, it just said that you have started sharing your screen, but we don't actually see, now we see something, yes.
See it? It should be a home slide. Can everybody see the home slide?
We see it now, we see it now.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about strategic self-care as an educational framework, right? As a critical component of the reparations movement. When I first moved to Atlanta in 2000, I was lucky enough to be in the presence of Mama Njeri Algani, who is now an ancestor, Attorney Molly Davis, Brother Jamoke, and a few other board members for the Atlanta chapter. And I got a chance to participate in helping to create the Ignore or Repair campaign for the National NCOBRA conference back in 2000. And one of the reasons that I wanted to contribute in that particular way when I first moved here was because I realized there was such a big gap in between what I was raised on, what I was put in my, almond milk growing up to ingest, and what the rest of the people that I love that were not raised with the type of cultural edge and cultural education on who we are and how we need to move. Everybody still with me? I hear somebody's unmuted. Okay, so what I realized was that it was super important to not only respect and appreciate what you were blessed with in terms of your knowledge, but have a way to be able to communicate, just like Sister Nia and many others have said, with those who are just not walking around with the knowledge and the exposure and the understanding that we have. So that ignore or repair phrase was really important to me because it broke down the basics of what I saw back then in 2000 as something critical, a critical decision that we get to make. So today I want to offer you an opportunity to learn a little bit about strategic self-care, and then you begin to have an option yourself to ignore the importance, right, of what I'm laying out, or to begin to repair using some specific tools I'd like to offer, as well as think about how you can scale this. I want to offer some of those suggestions to you. So we're going to move forward. I am representing being the founder of the Sister Care Alliance. We're a network of women of African descent that promote self-care as a form of social justice, all right, as a form of self-care. I'm not going to go into too deep about all of this, but the core of everything is not just that the Sister Care Alliance exists, but that the Self-Care Agency as a social enterprise has also begun to promote and train and produce strategic self-care consultants that are able to really walk you through what it means to really be more strategic about how you take care of yourself. Now, why is this important? Of all these different things that's listed under here that I'm specifically focused on, that is my purpose, I want to stop the share for a second and tell you why I found out this was important. So aside from running a law firm for 7 years, aside from being raised in a Pan-African mindset household, besides writing business plans and blah, 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 and all that stuff, when I went in to deliver my son, I hope everybody's with me. I really hate we're not in person because I like feedback and engagement, okay? But I'm going to pretend like I'm hearing stuff in the background. When I went in to deliver my son, it didn't matter that I could do all those things. It didn't matter that I had people who loved me. It didn't matter that I could open my mouth and say certain things that I needed. It didn't matter that I was conscious and aware of myself and my surroundings. What I wish someone would have helped me be better equipped with is how to be strategic. Does everybody hear me? I was not strategic in how I took care of myself. I didn't think that I needed a strategy. I knew that I needed to plan. I knew I needed to plan. I knew I needed to support. I needed some support, but I did not know that I needed a strategy because I did not fully understand how aggressive the society, the infrastructure, and this entire system that's been fueled by oppression and racism was. So what happened? I go in to deliver my son and I'm communicating. There were complications that of course were added by the stress of the environment. And I let them know, hey, I can still feel. This epidural is not working. We were going to have an emergency C-section, and I'm communicating. And what they ended up doing was ignoring what I said, wheeling me right on into the ER. And after I took that oxygen mask off my face and told them one more time, I can still feel, they tapped me on my shoulder and said, no, you can't still feel. We've given you so much that that's not true. They put the oxygen mask back on my face, held me down, and proceeded to cut me open, and four hands reached in to maneuver my child out of me while I was just beyond traumatized, was riddled with pain, could hear people talking, but the priority was my son and not me and my body and my mindset. To this day, my son survived. He is 11 years old. He is healthy, but the state of my mind, the state of my body, the state of my soul and my spirit, there wasn't a march that I organized before going in there that could have helped me. There wasn't there wasn't enough that I did, that I understood, that I was prepared for strategically before going into that could have assisted me, because I did not know how critical it was, how life-threatening it can be to not be strategic. Not just with your finances, not just with your health in general, but when you interact with systems that are based off of profit, your critical needs, the health of your mind and your body and your spirit are not the priority. Now, I'm not saying this to people who don't already know that, but I want to lay this out so that I can make the case for being strategic and so that you can understand what got me where I am. By the time I was done trying to save my own life and realizing that if I don't start paying attention to what I critically need, if I don't get really strategic about how I'm taking care of myself, this random self-care is not going to save me. From PTSD to postpartum to all of that, I had zero knowledge of how to climb my way out with this newborn baby. Until one day, I'm walking around with my son. He was maybe 2 weeks old, and I'm still stapled up. I am in a lot of pain. I didn't realize I had an infection. I had no doula, no post-delivery doula. I didn't even know. I knew doulas existed. I had one beforehand. I didn't think about post. No grandmother, nobody was there, just me and the baby. And I'm walking, holding the 2-week-old, and I'm shuffling, because that's all I could do was shuffle. And there was a groove in the floor where it was like a panel from this, the hardwood floor was lifted, and my foot hit that lift and it pulled and it stretched on those staples. And the pain that surged made me double over and almost drop my son on the floor. That's what it took. It took me barely sliding my hands underneath him to break his fall on the floor for me to realize that I am in a critical state. This is critical, Anana. Not only are you going to meet your demise because of your mindset, because of your physical health, which I had successfully suppressed. I had a PhD in suppressing pain and where I just suppressed it all. But it also spilled over into my care for my son. This is happening all the time, not just to Black women, but as a people, we are operating in a survival state, and we have become and continue to be unable to identify when we are in crisis, right? So those who are therapists, those who are in the healing profession, this is not new information, but I'm trying to make a nice broad case so we can all come to the same conclusion that random self-care, random addressing of needs, popping in here or there to things that can help one aspect of who we are is not enough. We have got to be strategic about how we move and how we care for ourselves. So I wanted to share that. If there's anything that you are feeling that's coming up for you, I want you to put it in the chat. Now, having studied electrical engineering and being raised primarily by my father, my mind goes to strategy. And just like Sister Nia said, there's so many different components to what we need. And just like many of you have said throughout this day and the other day, and what we will continue to say is we need each other, right? This is a multi-layered process. But I need you all to understand what I'm gonna talk about is strengthening a muscle, strengthening your muscle around how strategic you are about identifying what you critically need in more than one category of care in your life, because that spills over into what your family critically needs in more than one category, which spills over into what your community needs, okay? Everybody with me so far? drop something in the chat. I really, I'm into human beings and pulses. I enjoy chess, and my son wins awards in chess. Drop something in the chat for me so I know that there are people with a pulse listening. And I'm gonna put my screen up so I can tell you a little bit more about what's gonna happen today. All right, so as a result of all of this, I authored a book, I created a strategic self-care program, and then I began with establishing the Sister Care Alliance, where we have chapters and representatives in Charlotte, Brooklyn, New York, Atlanta, Puerto Rico, DC, Savannah, and Dallas, Texas. Outside of just my background, training people on this particular program has become one of the most important things I am tasked to do. And as a result of that, we have not only designed the program and started training it, but we're also establishing official self-care days that's strategically laid out to make sure that there's community awareness of existing programs, existing initiatives that have not been framed underneath an umbrella around strategic self-care. And so we pull all these different organizations together. We also work on specific social justice actions and participate in lots of coalitions. And it's just important that the training that we do, this particular program I'm going to touch on, is to train survivors of human trafficking, domestic violence, and then also the everyday walking around person that's just trying to make it through. We train them on this particular program. So we've gotten a little bit acquainted. I don't know much about you all, but what we're going to talk about is I'm going to continue to make the case for why we need to be strategic, right? And then what my organization and what I have learned thus far doing this work since 2011, which is when we established the first official self-care day in the city of Atlanta. Please, please, please put information in the chat. Please put your thoughts in the chat. I need to hear from you. This is, although we are digital and I know it's the end of the day, it is so important that as things come up, we practice using our voice. That's been said a lot today. Your exercise of saying something out loud, typing it in the chat, just that exercise alone is so critical to how we bond, how we connect, how we understand each other. So please do that for me. So I talked already a little bit about the strategic self-care program. We have graduating classes, we have self-care intensives, and then it's rooted in the book Self-Care Matters, a Revolutionary's Approach, which is what I wrote in 2016, published in 2016. And it houses a lot of good information, but if you see this little brown face, can y'all see this little brown face over here on the right? Okay, somebody unmute and say, I see you, sis.
We see you, sis. We got
I see you, sis.
With
We
that.
see you. We see you.
We see you.
All right, thank you. Ooh, thank y'all. I need voices. All right. So this is Watoto Shule, who's run by Baba Onaje, who's an ancestor now, in Washington, D.C. in the 70s when my father was at Howard. And this is my little face. So I put this up here to say that we all popped out, right? But none of us popped out with an instructional book on what it means to be strategic about taking care of ourselves in more than one category of care. We all are just walking around here, just like our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, all of these generations, in addition to the trauma that we've experienced, we still are missing the proactive instruction. Are y'all with me?
Bring it on. Gotcha.
Good. All right, so what have we learned? Well, so far, the tools to aid in internal repair, right? That to repair and recover, we should be empowered with knowing what we need. And what has happened is generationally being able to access within ourselves the answer to that question, what do I need? Just reaching down and accessing that information, it proves to be a challenge, right? But being able to identify and act on what we need can be interrupted by what? Nia. No?
By trauma, grief, and crisis.
Thank you. Who said that?
I said it.
That Mama Makemba?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I can't see everybody's face. I appreciate you. So yes, So it can be interrupted. So being able to even access what you need, right? So then day-to-day decision-making to just care for ourselves, even making it to a therapy session, right? To heal ourselves, attend the quote unquote right meetings that we need to be in, deciding even what to learn, knowing what and how to prioritize, and then what to do with new information we do get. Let's say we do come to this NCOBRA conference and we're just jam-packed, but being able to move forward from here as an individual when nobody else is around is also about being strategic about how you take care of yourself, right? And so when that is happening, it's strained when we aren't sure of what we need once we leave those types of sessions. So also, healthy day-to-day decision-making requires having tools and strategies to select from to care for ourselves, right? We should be building on this kind of mental muscle memory that can kick in when new trauma hits us. And then support network based in strategy, right? So our support network, those who are supporting us, should be also tied into what we strategically need to accomplish that's tied to our purpose. All right, lastly, a clear understanding of how to identify a critical need. What makes a need critical when you feel like you have 10 different needs, right? Is anybody familiar with that kind of quandary where you are just unsure of which need to address first? Somebody unmute and tell me if you're familiar with that.
Definitely.
What is it like when you're unsure of how to not only identify if it's critical or not, but which need you should address first? What does that feel like to not know?
Wow, I don't even know how to answer that.
It's paralyzing.
There's a whole bunch of when you have a whole bunch of critical needs and you can get stuck because like which one do I put my energy towards first because they're all important.
Exactly, you get stuck in this little loop, right? So
paralysis of analysis.
So what we have learned thus far since this 2011 introduction of teaching and training based off of a strategic self-care format is that there can be a trauma and impact that will happen. It's either generational or it's recurring or it's brand new, right? And so the first thing we've learned is you have to create trust, safe spaces, and time to address it. And do you all see this last thing, the time to address it?
Mm-hmm.
Typically over the years, it's been since 2011, it's 2021, it's like 10 years. So I've been teaching this particular framework for 10 years. Getting anyone who understands that their needs are not being met, that they're falling apart in whatever category of care, to stop and find the time and find the motivation to protect the time to do it tends to be one of the first biggest challenges. But what I've also found is that organizations and individuals who want to be able to support the most successful ones, they create a trusting and a trust-based relationship and a safe space to make it happen. Then when you move on, there's acknowledging the trauma, there's treatment and crisis and counseling, and then there's like a needs assessment because the crisis is the crisis, okay? Nothing is going down until the crisis is dealt with. But after that, there's still a type of needs assessment that has to go on, and that's what the program is based on. So it's dynamic, your needs change, but there's also no centralized location that we walk out with where we've consolidated all of our needs. Now, if you have a case manager, you have somebody working with you, right? But when do we get to be empowered? When do we get to walk away and really take good care of something that's centralizing what we critically need in more than one category of care? All right, so the strategy and the planning and the application, these are two different things. So once you start strategizing, then you actually have to apply it, which means you have to deal with other people too, okay? All right, and then the active healing process, all of that occurs, but you have to repeat this process over and over and over again. This is what we have learned thus far, okay? I'm offering this for organization heads. I'm offering this in depth for a reason, and I'm moving quickly, but I know that it's recorded. So I hope whoever is looking back at this, this helps to better inform how you move and how you prioritize working with those who are unfamiliar with reparations, uncomfortable with dealing in a scenario where there's any type of agitation or angst or can cause anxiety. And then also when you're trying to grow your organizations around trauma-based work, it is super important that you understand this particular process helps when you don't leave a piece out. You have to create trust. There has to be some strategic planning, right? Now, what else have we learned? We've learned that all of this sounds all hunky-dory and all beautiful and you know, ashe and ashe, yes, but is it scalable? It has to be scalable. So these individual activities that we're engaged in, these individual organizational projects, as we spread out, as we begin to gel and really leverage each other's strengths, right, around reparations, around the healing of our communities, we have to make sure that whatever we're creating is scalable, and that's what we're doing here. Also, stopping the harm at the top, stopping the harm and the traumatic impact makes healing more possible. Those who help organize this process, if you are involved in this kind of work, you should be trained and you should be exercising strategic self-care as well, okay? And then lastly, what we've also learned is institutions who incorporate this approach increase membership, improve member retention, improve trust and community involvement, because you're actually addressing what? Needs. You're helping people drum up their own needs, and then you're actually having a more intimate and protected and trusting environment for those who need an incubator, right, for healing. All right. Oh, sorry, one good point, especially those who work in your organizations that are challenged with compassion fatigue and burnout, and then just a general high turnover where you lose a lot of the knowledge base, right? Because people are literally passing out over the stress because they have no strategies to stay in the game, right? All right, so awareness of the categories of need is also important. These are the different categories that we focus on, but it's all transferable based off of however you want to title it. And when you know what you need, how do you care for yourself in the face of trauma and grief? So I'm just going to touch on this for a second. You had to learn, and now you have an option today to ignore or repair how you are dealing with. What strategies are you personally using to be able to address crisis, trauma, and grief? Well, I want to make sure that you all understand that each of these different things carry their own weight and they require work. But whether you're the helper or you're the survivor, you're still experiencing it either through transference or something else. Now, how this impacts it, strategic self-care helps you to make better informed decisions to enhance this internal repair, because safety is challenged, as well as your ability to call upon what you critically need to continue taking care of yourself. I'm going to pause for a second because I want to look in the chat. Okay, so getting to the point. Okay. Follow up. Okay, I just want to see if there are any questions in here. All right, here we go. All right, so if this is what's existing, then what challenges, right, are we dealing with when it comes to reparations education? Well, I'll tell you what we've experienced, right? When you're talking about dealing with trauma-based education, because when you're talking about repairing centuries of just brutality that have transformed itself into an emotional slavery framework, which again, I want to give a shout out to Sister Nia for the emotional emancipation work that you all are doing. One, there's an overwhelm of information that those who you want to continue to grow in the movement are experiencing. So whether it's historical, current, or future data, the planning can add to the daily overwhelm of our people. And so strategic self-care helps with how people can digest, address their needs, but then also just be honest about which part of this process is overwhelming. So far, so good? Unmute somebody.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
All right, emotional capacity inclusion barriers. When you are burnt out, when you have reached your max, it may have nothing to do with even reparations, maybe just in your life in that day, parenting, going to the office, whatever. When you hit a certain peak of emotional capacity, that bars you, keeps you from being included in certain discussions because you're spent. So how do we address those who have emotional capacity issues, but they still want to be included? Also, being unable to identify the difference between critical needs, normal needs, and wants. That is a barrier and that is a challenge, right? Inherited and modeled low self-care behaviors by leadership. If you have leadership walking around, don't know what they need, not strategic about addressing it, and then they're walking into meetings stressed out, issues that are highly critical, that they're transferring that stress onto who they're teaching and hoping to continue to lead, that also is a challenge that we see when teaching the strategic self-care framework. And then lastly, organizations without the capacity to provide either free in-house counseling, or if you're partnering with organizations that offer regular counseling, or even strategic self-care support groups. These are challenges that will make dealing with a traumatic topic like reparations, the day-to-day trauma of being Black, okay? All of those things are weighted upon those who we would like to not only benefit from the movement, but we also want them to be healed in the process, not after, not cross our fingers and hope they survive and make it to this day where they can actually get help and things are funded. But how can we, in the process of working on behalf of our people, be well, be strategic about addressing our needs and being aware? All right, so this is just a little, I'm gonna skip past a lot of this because I wanna get to the Q&A, but just remember, when you're silent, you're not being protected. This is the ancestor Audre Lorde, who did a lot of work in the area of self-care as political warfare. This is one of the reasons why we believe self-care is an act of social justice, and speaking up for yourself, not being silent, is also an act of self-care. So the act of addressing a critical or normal need is our program's definition of self-care. And I'm not going to go into too many more details, but it is difficult because that daily distraction cloud is also supported by organizations that make money off of your distraction and any behaviors that are tied to you not addressing your need. Yes, payrolls are literally based on how distracted you can be when it comes to making a decision about what it is you want to purchase, how you spend your time, who you spend time with. And when it's random and not strategic, somebody's winning. Somebody's winning, and that somebody has their own strategic business plan. That somebody meets on a regular basis with political leaders to work on their strategies. And so I'm offering this as an opportunity for us to create a common base framework for being strategic. All right. So we talked about strategic self-care. These are different categories of care. This is just a general definition. It's the act of planning and executing regular self-care. To address multiple categories of care. What, everybody, until you are no longer operating in a critical state. So random self-care is, oh yeah, I took a bath. Oh, randomly, I read a book, I don't know. But then something randomly can happen in your life. And when you're random about your self-care, then you're random about getting the benefits and the support that you need. And we need you to be strategic. Strategic is checking in on a regular basis. Tying yourself to organizations that have frameworks that help with regularity. So these are the types of things that we teach. Now, what's important, and we're bringing it to a close shortly, and I know I'm moving at lightning speed, I'm doing it on purpose. The benefits of a strategic self-care framework is tied to know thyself. A lot of times, because self-care has been commodified by what happens, right, in this country, we tend to feel separate from it. But if you just reverse the terms, it's caring for self. It's also about knowing thyself. Practicing knowing what you need and how to address it helps you more frequently expose more intimate information about yourself to those who can help, and when you're navigating what it is that you need to apply. Building a muscle of strategic mindset is so important. Reducing and eradicating the power of emotional overseers. Let me tell you really quickly. Let me show you really quickly what an emotional overseer is. Queen Anana, just letting you know. Okay, got it, no problem. Actually, okay, good. Gives examples of between tactical and being strategic. Sure, so an emotional overseer is somebody who knows exactly what an emotional trigger would be, something that they could say could get you to focus on one thing instead of another. When you are strategic about addressing what you critically need, you start your day doing an assessment of what you critically need in more than one category of care. You have an idea already of which of those categories of care, which of those needs will help to give you the fuel that you need, the support that you need to deal with someone when you encounter an emotional overseer.
Wow.
To not be strategic is you wake up in the morning, you cross your fingers, you do something by rote, or something you just normal, brush your teeth, wash your face, you walk out the door, and then when you encounter somebody, you have no strategy. You have not identified what it is you critically need to even deal with them, even though you're going to see them every day, even though you know you're going to have that encounter. And what happens is the impact, the result, the damage that is done to your spirit, your emotional state, and your mindset on a regular basis when you're not strategic is far more impactful, far more arresting than if you were to stop each morning and regularly ask yourself, what do I critically need today? That is an idea of strategy. Okay.
Sister Nana, I have a question I want to ask just to jump off the Q&A.
Yeah, I do want to do that, but let me give one more thing, okay?
Okay, okay.
Okay, thanks. So I'm gonna skip because the most important takeaway, and it's just one, this is the end of the slides. An individual education on strategic self-care has an immediate impact, period. Organizations that really begin to add that type of framework paired with counseling, you will see changes more immediately, especially in your leadership and the decision-making of your leadership. You can go to sistercarealliance.org, and everything that I'm saying, you can be in tracking, you can download. This is a Google Doc, so get it, use it. We set this up during the beginning of COVID to get people more strategic about what they want to do. So I wanted to make sure I gave that to you all. Thank you. I know I moved through this really quickly, but I wanted to give you all enough in the recording to circle back so that you get a little more inspired about being more strategic. Yes, brother.
Thank you so much. So when you keep mentioning strategic, you're repeating strategic. Yeah. Now, strategic, it sounds like routine, correct?
So routine
or connected to routine. And a lot of times people find routine boring and, you know, trapping, and I'm confined to routine, but I'm trying to be free and flow with the life, you know, get on my vibe. So, I mean, how do you like get people to see that routine is important for your strategy while people are so, they view routine as some kind of like cage or trap?
Can I just mention something? It's Kathleen here. So strategic to me doesn't necessarily mean routine, but it does mean well thought out and organized. So a strategy is well thought out and organized. It doesn't have to be a routine necessarily, unless that's your strategy.
So I'm going to agree with Sister Kathleen, and I'm going to just add to that. To answer the question, when you are not used to being strategic, your definition of strategy will evolve as you actually go through the steps of not just my program, but anybody else's process and formula of what strategy actually is. So I can't convince somebody who, when I say strategy, they hear routine. I can't convince them of anything. All that I can do is I can say, hey, when I say strategic self-care, I'm going to give you exactly what that looks like, and I want you to try it. And what will happen is that person will come up with their own understanding, their own wording, their own formula that will seep in a lot deeper. But I found over and over again, to try and convince somebody of something, it never works. All that you can do is say, hey, wake up every morning, and I offer this to everyone. Wake up every morning for just 3 days in a row. I like to say 7, okay? But let's just say for 3 days in a row, I want you to wake up in the morning, look yourself in the mirror, and say, what do I need? Spiritually, emotionally, economically, in terms of my time, money, and energy, artistically, physically, educationally, and socially. The lie is that we're unable to multitask and do that. But then we show up to work, we do all these other things that involve the same muscles. We are strategic in other areas of our life. We know how to be strategic, but what you have to do is you have to reprogram yourself to understand how to use the same talents in the area of taking care of yourself. Now, it'll take a second for many to start realizing this is really some ingrained stuff. This is some real buried resistance that I have to asking myself what I critically need. We can go through the psychoanalysis all day. That's for your therapy session. I'm here to offer you opportunities and options to try out different strategies until you come up with a formula that is for you, so that when nobody else is around, you are able to continue moving forward towards addressing what you need, not just for you, but for your family and for your community. Is that helpful, brother?
Yeah, because absolutely, because there's different, like you said, the routine. What people are saying, I have no problem with being free flowing to a large degree, but when you hear strategy, as I said, a chess player, it's like, okay, I'm going to move this first, I'm going to move that first, because this strategy is going to get me here, that's going to get it here. And then if you want to repeat the success, that tends to be routine. So I was trying to get the understanding of how do you kind of balance that, being routine while being flexible and adaptable at the same time, is what I was trying to get at.
What's going to happen? I like how you are framing it, because I know for you, that is a connecting dot, right? Like, oh, the routine is going to help me better learn. The routine is going to help me better apply the strategies so that I don't have to just consciously think about it all the time. What I want to say is, and I like that, I offer to you to try the program. Just call me, brother, call me, right? Because what's going to happen is, as soon as you hit a sweet spot, everybody that I've worked with, you hit this sweet spot where you start to actually address a critical need that you didn't realize not addressing it was contaminating so many other areas of your life. And that sweetness, that feeling, that salve, that ointment that you just created for yourself, that you can recreate for yourself, ends up being a better motivator than hearing the word routine. That motivation is what has you doing it over and over again, that ends up shaping into a specific strategy for you. Does that make sense? So that's another inside out perspective as opposed to the outside in.
Is another way to think of that is that a routine could be somebody's strategy. A routine could be their strategy, but for some people, maybe a routine is not your strategy.
So again, I agree with you. And I also know that whatever word comes out for each individual, it's going to fuel them to continue moving forward. So if you're doing something over and over again, and it's strengthening, so if you're lifting weights, right? Weightlifting routine, yes, it will strengthen your muscle. It will give you what you need if your goal is the result of the routine. Here's the difference. Y'all with me?
Yes.
The difference is, no trainer worth their salt is going to send you to the gym to do the same thing over and over again. A trainer is asking for feedback on a regular basis, and that is what the regular needs assessment is, right? When you check in. Now, can you routinely check in with yourself and assess it? Yes, you can. But this is part of the issue that the barriers that we run into when it comes to dealing with the basics of what each person individually needs. Is if we get into a terminology war, if we get into how more than one person should be absorbing something, this process is more about unveiling for yourself what you really need to hear, what words work for you, how it works, so that you can stay better engaged. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Now I got some questions. Absolutely, it makes perfect sense. I got a couple questions. Is an example of strategic self-care to go to bed at a certain time? Which is, and after I read it, I was like, wait a minute. Did we just get back into the routine conversation? Okay, I'm gonna ask another question. I'm gonna answer your question.
Okay. The definition of self-care as it pertains to our program is to address a critical or normal need. It's the act, it's an action. Strategic self-care is to regularly address what you critically need in more than one category of care until you're no longer operating in a critical state in any category of care. And as you regularly, not routinely, whatever word you want to slide in there, right ahead.
Right.
Going to bed on time will be a component of someone's overall strategic self-care plan.
Got it. Okay, another question. Would you support creating statewide health plans that are ACA compliant?
And tell me why you're asking me that question.
It's not my question. I don't know.
Whose question is it?
The person is Herschel Daniels Jr. If you could go in the chat and explain why they're asking the question, Herschel.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to, I want to see the connecting factors. I'm going to answer it though.
Okay, Herschel Daniels, can you type in why you're asking that question specifically? And they typed, we are doing that in Ohio.
So most plans that are city, state, or national in their infrastructure, the plans that are set up to properly integrate other complementary programs typically are more helpful for the community. So the details of that particular plan, I don't know how flexible and open to the integration of other existing community programs there are. But I'll tell you, when we did an assessment of, say, the public defender's office, and I'm going to show how it relates. That's why I wanted to know how it relates. We did an assessment of the public defender's office, and there were so many things that they were trying to do, but they were not addressing the needs of the community. They also were not working with existing community organizations that already had a lot of data, that already knew what was needed, that already had great ideas and actually successful programs that could have better enhanced what they were trying to implement. So I'm giving you a little bit more of a broader answer because I think there are nuanced components of several programs that have to do with public health, healthcare, all of the above. And I don't believe that many of those programs are set up always, and that could be the case with that one, but they're not always set up to properly leverage what's going on with community organizations and how we can kind of work better together to help the communities. I don't know if that answered the question, but I wanted to make sure that I gave my perspective on it. That's why I wanted to understand where the question was coming from. Okay,
here's another question.
Okay.
Could you go through those categories we should assess each morning again?
Sure, and if you go to selfcareagency.com or
I put in the chat several times and put it again.
sistercarealliance.org, either or, literally there's a document that has everything that I said that you can download and practice writing what you need. So SEAPES, SEEPS. So spiritual and emotional are turn signals for each other, right? When you're constipated spiritually, it shows up emotionally and vice versa, right? Economic is your time, money, and energy all together. Artistic.
Wait, could you repeat that again? The economic piece?
Economic self-care is defined as it pertains to this program as your time, money, and energy. What do you need on a regular basis? What do you need today? What do you need at 6:39 p.m. Eastern time in terms of your time, money, and energy? One or all three. That is how you begin to regularly address strategically, right? What you need in terms of your economic self-care.
Is this type of...
Hold on, let me finish the categories. So spiritual and emotional, economic, time, money, and energy. Artistic is how you creatively express and address what you need. It's different for everybody. Physical is your body and your environment. Educational is not just formal. What do you need to learn to address what you need? And then social, who do you need to interact with? Where do you need to be? What do you need to be in proximity of? SEAPES. is what we have chosen. Now, can you correlate other yes, you're like, what about finances? What about psychological? And you can use whatever word you want. Do not do the terminology war. Pick what works for you. This is a starting place to centralize communication, but those are the categories. Yes, brother, you had a question?
Yeah, this is also from the chat as well. Is this type of care eligible under any employer's EAP benefit?
Well, healthcare in general has overlapping categories that, yes, fit into this. And so it depends on how grants are written. It depends on that terminology connection. So yes, it can all fit in. There's several organizations. I mean, I've even done large federal government trainings that this fit completely into. So it's definitely broad enough to be fit into any type of healthcare and public health framework.
Sis, I am so glad that you were able to wrap this portion up with the strategic thing, because as a chess player, and I saw you were trying to say, okay, he's a chess player, the routine, you know, I'm going to do E4, and I'm going to, you know, so yeah, you know, so you understood where I was going, but I think the most important thing was you provided I don't know, because that's your word, but I'll use it. You provided strategies for people, and you also helped us, I think, you really reoriented our minds, at least mine and some other folks, about how we see our own self-care, where people see self-care, you know, light a candle, take a bath, you know, and those things would be, I guess, tactical, but you're really getting into, okay, how has this become a part of my life? How do I plan for not just what's going to happen, but what's not going to happen? And that's why I think it's important.
Yes, and some of the damage, the evidence of the damage of trauma is the difficulty in assessing what you need. I mean, there's a reason that it's not easy. There's a reason why we're not waking up, and we feel even slightly anxious and overwhelmed with the thought of asking ourselves, what do I need spiritually, emotionally, economically, artistically? Like, just the thought of that can drum up a sense of trauma or low self-worth, or like it's not possible. All of that is just evidence that we deserve every drop of funding to help us work through it, to go to those emotional emancipation circles, to have trusted, safe spaces, to be able to work through our financial literacy, to be able to study our history with a counselor next to us, so that when we read about Tulsa, we read about the just disgusting trauma that pregnant Black women who were enslaved, how they would dig a hole in the ground so that our bellies would not be bothered, because that was their product, and so that they could whip us. That this is all trauma. And so there is no accident that it is a challenging and difficult process to sit and be strategic about what we critically need, and then even talk about it. Because then jumping to the intellectualization of it is a safe space. That's why we need that emotional environment that allows us to really say, this is hard. This is harder than I thought. To really not only verbalize what I need, but create a strategic plan to address it. And then get to a place where I'm exhibiting and modeling for my children what it looks like to do that. I asked my son, I'm gonna close out with this. I asked my son, because I was nervous. He was maybe 6 at the time. And I realized I had never asked him, what do you need? I never asked him that. And so I said, I'm gonna have to ask him, but I was nervous, because I was like, what if he says, I need you to be a better mother? Right? What if he says something that hurts my feelings? They're all kind of really serious, buried thoughts that we have. And so I asked him one day, because I had been doing all kind of stuff, breaking my back, especially during COVID, right?
Right, of course.
Right? Just like, oh my God, am I meeting the needs? Am I meeting the needs? But I decided to ask him. This was pre-COVID. And so I said, Zaire, can you, I want to ask you a question. He says, yes, Mom. I said, what do you need spiritually and emotionally? And then I shut up and I waited for him to answer. And my heart was like, do, 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 do. Because I also felt bad. I was like, wow, I don't even know what he's going to say. I don't even know what's going on in him. And the first thing out of his mouth is, he said, I need more hugs. And of course, I want buckets. Because I was like, oh my God, I'm a failure, right? this is the emotional journey not all, some of us go through to just even have a conversation about needs. So then I stayed quiet because it wasn't about me. I wanted it to be about him. And I didn't prompt, and he had a second answer. He said, you know what else? I just need to drink tea with you a little more in the mornings. I like drinking tea with you, Mama.
I mean, that's from the mouth of babes. I mean,
exactly. But the tool, the strategy that I was working on within myself and teaching all these people, I was able to not only ask him the question, but I was able to model for him and show him what he needs is important, that he has to practice drumming up what's inside of him, because when I'm not around, when he doesn't have certain things, he has to have a strong trust.
Absolutely. Sister Nana, it's been a pleasure. I thank you so much. And everyone, make sure you check out her website, check out what she's doing, because she and everyone on in this section of self-healing and self-repair, be sure that you use that to take care of yourself and deal with internal reparations.